Oh, I forgot I have to do like an actual intro. Hello, and welcome everyone to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie, and we are very excited today. We are going to be having a guest, but not yet. Not yet. Ben Kohn of the Fight Site will be coming on in segment 2 to talk about I guess only surprisingly grappling heavy UFC fight night. If, like me, you were half expecting every single grappler versus grappler fight to be shitty kickboxing, as it so often is. But there was a lot of fantastic grappling on last weekend's card, which is probably why, Phil, we talk about striking mostly. I don't want to impugn the other martial arts or anything, but like, do you ever think, like, when it's a card that has tons of grappling and everyone's always like, that card sucked and no one likes it? I don't know. Yep. Well, Ben doesn't touch on that, really, but he does have a lot of great things to say about the grappling. You'll hear that in segment 2. And then a word about his instructional with black belt Gene Sakirski on his new fancy guillotine technique, which he promises will help you hurt your friends and relatives worse than ever before. First, let's talk about some face punching, Phil. We had 2 notable examples this last weekend. The less notable, Adrian Yanez, Davey Grant. Really the only, really top-notch striking contest on this entire UFC card, I think. Am I out of pocket with that remark? I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah, that's got to be it, right?
I guess Cody Durden had some fun exchanges with Chilong Auri before he decided to get racist on Twitter. Otherwise, that was basically it. Great fight. Fantastic. Adrian Yanez rocks. Davey Grant is the kind of fighter that should absolutely just never be cut from any promotion that has him signed, because he is going to get a good fight out of everyone he faces. But a slightly bigger deal happened not in the tiny little Apex Center octagon. That was Terence Crawford taking on Sean Porter, who subsequently retired, which kind of feels crazy to me. Sean Porter is one of those boxers who he's been like the B-side of half the really big fights I can remember. He's been around as just a perennial contender for probably the entire time that I have been like actively watching boxing. And this was it. In some ways, I think it was an unusually clean performance for Sean Porter. In other ways, it's like ultimately Terence Crawford made it look uncannily easy to beat him, which is, I guess, just sort of the levels conversation between a thinker and technician and finisher like Terence Crawford and, a guy like Sean Porter who spent his entire career just like being strong and not getting tired. And he's more of an MMA fighter, Sean Porter.
Yeah.
Like, he's really big on like the conditioning and the work ethic. Like after the fight, did you catch the post-fight interviews, Phil?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was great. Sean Porter's father is his coach.
Yeah, was this the one where he just shat all over his son?
Yeah. Yeah, he threw in the towel after 2 knockdowns, which is not at all like MMA. And then Sean Porter got up there and he was like, well, we never really talked about it, but my father basically, we had a silent understanding that when it was time to throw in the towel, he would do that. So I understand his decision, even if we haven't talked about it. He was very gracious. And then his father gets in the mic and he's like, my son did not prepare. He's a piece of shit. It was easy for me to stop the fight. I didn't want to see his terrible preparation come through any more than it already had.
Yeah. You're wondering why this man retired.
Yeah. Also, you're his coach.
Huh? Yeah. If only he'd been taught better. If only he'd been raised better.
Oh. Wait
what's your excuse? Is it genetic? Because I also have bad news for you.
Yeah.
There's nowhere you can turn.
Yeah, it was sort of weird. Sean Porter has been like more or less the same exact fighter for so long that I did find that actually very strange that his dad, not just the, burying your son because presumably you're embarrassed in front of an audience, but also like your son's game has been pretty much like impressive and difficult, but stagnant for like a decade at least. I imagine Sean Porter was very similar as an amateur boxer too. So I don't know who you're really, if the preparation was supposed to be something drastically different than this, then I don't know what you were hoping for, because he's been Sean Porter this whole time. So thoughts on the fight, Phil? Terence Crawford's really good.
It's very, very good.
He can basically like let the whole fight just sort of happen and then just like kind of pick a moment. There's literally in his corner before the round with the knockdowns that ended the fight, he says something like, "Can I go get him now?"
Yeah.
And then goes out there and starts beating Sean Porter's ass.
So, I don't know whether this is recency bias or me just being lazy, me being a lazy hack, which is entirely possible. Mm-hmm. But he does seem like he's kind of boxing's Peter Yan. That he's doesn't give me the impression of being like a super nice person.
Oh, I like Bud. I don't know why. I've always found him.
I think he as a fighter, he seems like a cruel fighter. I do remember like after he fought Amir Khan, and he was just like, so what did you think of Amir Khan? Was he really quick? And he was like, no. People I fought way faster than him.
That was another part of the post-fight interview for this, where the commentator got up there to do the interview, and he was like, it wasn't an easy fight. Obviously, no Sean Crowder fight is easy for the opponent. At what point did you figure him out? And with that very tone, Crawford replied, round one.
Yeah, he fights from both stances. Yeah, he just seems like a mean, cold individual. His fights seem like an inevitability. Yeah, he's that guy. I mean, I think in some ways this also like stops him from stardom. It in some ways feels like it might be sending him down the Andre Ward route of being the guy that everyone is like, oh yeah, he's super good. Because I mean, he's even more like Peter Yan likes hurting people, but Peter Yan knows that that's cool, and he wants to be cool.
Yeah.
And Crawford is just like, no, my name is not anything like No Mercy, that's late. My name is Bud. And
I'm just a guy.
Not interested in being anything cool. I just want to embarrass people for being stupid against me.
Yeah.
Go away. That's it.
He's way cooler than Peter Yan, though. Bud is a cooler nickname. You can tell it's like a real nickname.
Uh-huh.
Somebody actually gave... No one fucking calls Peter Yan No Mercy. Are you shitting me? No one says that to him. Bud is Bud. Yeah, there is...
he's not just cooler. He is colder.
Yeah, I do see what you mean.
Were he in MMA, he would never do a tornado punch.
No, he wouldn't. You're right. He wouldn't do any of that shit. Everything... In fact... Okay,
so disgusted.
Here's the thing about this fight, and this relates to Terence Crawford's comments about how he figured Sean Porter out in round one. I don't think that's actually like just a lie of bravado. Like, he kind of did just do nothing in the first round. He really did. Not nothing, but offensively speaking, he moved around. He gave Porter an opportunity to show him a couple patterns. Interestingly, he did that all in orthodox and then basically never went back to orthodox for the rest of the fight.
Huh.
But I think he just wanted to see what he spent basically the first two rounds just giving Sean Porter a chance to show him where his openings were. And he seemed, I don't know how much of this was in the moment or probably, in fact, I've seen some training footage for this fight. It was figured out in camp, but he had like two punches he wanted to land, and he kind of spent the rest of the fight like fine tuning them and figuring out how to just make the right the opening happen at the right moment that he could land them. It was the left uppercut, and a check right hook. And they both make sense. Sean Porter is a over aggressive, lunging fighter. He will shift out of stance. He will lean forward. He will duck and look at the floor, and keep swinging, coming forward in a long, wide, straight line. And, you get him bending over with the uppercut, or you step off the tracks and hit him with the check hook as he goes past. And both of those things worked, and then they worked really well, both in the final round, resulting in 2 knockdowns that ended the fight. So it kind of does feel like he knew exactly what he was going to do, wasn't really too pressed about it, spent all that time just sort of moving around and working the body, and it was a close fight is the thing. This is the
odds.
Yeah, Petr Yan would never allow that to happen. You know, by choice, I don't think so.
You gave him 12 rounds, I reckon.
Okay. Maybe. This is the thing with boxing. Yeah, you can literally just go out there and happily burn an early round, and that's in fact a good idea because there's so many to play with. But, it's not like Sean Porter was I don't even think he was up on one of the cards at the time of the stoppage, and the momentum had definitely shifted, and Crawford was probably going to win the rest of the fight anyway. But it was kind of like 50-50 the rounds up to that point. Mm-hmm. And Crawford he didn't rush to get there at all.
Is it worth thinking of? I honestly haven't probably watched enough tape of him to know, but worth thinking of Crawford's 2 approaches as being orthodox for safety and southpaw for damage.
Oh, I think there's definitely an element of that.
It does seem to be one of the narratives of his fights is that he really starts out.
Yeah.
Often starts out orthodox. I think Gamboa is one where he fights him orthodox for 3 rounds, and then he's maybe that sort of.
He sticks to it for quite a while and does not do very well in the early going of that Yuriorkis Gamboa fight.
Yeah, and that might be literally that might be one of his keys for when he thinks he's figured people out.
Yeah,
if you're taking him at face value, he might be okay, I got him. Now to screw him up from southpaw.
No, I think there definitely is a thing to that. That there is an element of truth to that. I think it's the right hand in front, the right hook is more often than not Terence Crawford's killer punch. It's a brutal body shot. It's a brutal lead upstairs. It is his best counter. Although the left uppercut, which I love, especially uppercuts to the body off the shoulder roll, that was probably the one he landed the most in this fight. But yeah, no, I think southpaw is the murdering stance for Terence Crawford. In fact, his corner was asking him to outbox Sean Porter a lot throughout this fight, more than he was. I got the sense they wanted him to be out there using his southpaw jab and sort of keeping Porter busy and outmaneuvering. Crawford wanted to counterpunch.
Yeah, he
wanted to give Porter some space and say, "Cross this, so I can whack you as you try to crash into me." And I don't know, man. There's on the one hand, I want to see a more super consistent. It almost just it felt like the end of Usual Suspects, where which is I should contextualize that by saying that's a movie that I don't really like. Because once you watch it once, you can never watch it again. Because now you know that all the stuff you're watching until the last 10 minutes is just fake. In the world of the movie, it's not real. That's what you find out. I'm sorry if I'm spoiling people who are listening, by the way, who haven't seen The Usual Suspects. But it kind of felt like that, where this whole fight, it had a relatively competitive feeling. It was fun to watch. It was exciting. And now in retrospect, it's just kind of none of the stuff Sean Porter was doing was real. Terence Crawford was allowing the fight to play out this way because he really wanted to land a counterpunch and knock Sean Porter out on the way in.
Yeah. That's the thing, Crawford doesn't really look like he should be a puncher. I don't know, like just like the way he like approaches fights. He doesn't really seem like he should be, but he just really can.
Oh, he's
Like when he wants to just kill people, he really can. But it's just there is just this feeling of inevitability where it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna try and outbox or play with this guy for whatever, for as long as I like. But if it comes down to it, I will just kill him.
Yeah, it's like if a fight, it was like if a fight, you thought the fight was competitive, and then at the end it turns out to be, for our MMA listeners, like Whitaker Gastelum. You're like, oh, I guess it was actually, that was the gulf the whole time. I don't know. It is strange. Terence Crawford is absolutely a murderous puncher, by the way, and a hell of a finisher, which is a combination of his skill and his. I think he is naturally a pretty damn hard hitter. Okay, well, let's.
I mean, he can, like I said, that's why I think he is like boxing's yarn. He can pretty much,
yeah,
everything.
Yeah, he can adjust to anything. He can come up with any number of solutions. He can apparently even be particular and favor certain solutions, and just that'll be fine. He will make them work one way or another. By the way, the one of the last two knockdowns, the second one is kind of a, like a Crawford is throwing combinations. Basically every time, by the way, in the fight, he just put combinations together. He was like landing at will. That's kind of what the second knockdown looks like. He's already got Porter pretty out of sorts. The first one is really, really pretty though, where he touches, he's in southpaw and he touches Porter with the jab. He triggers that forward surge that he is expecting, but the way he gets just out of the way of the surging Sean Porter's punches is like, Terence Crawford's a fighter made for slow motion. It looks like a dance. It looks like ice skating or something. He cuts this little back step and the right hand misses. He doesn't even flinch at it. Left hook is coming. He pivots and like shoulder bumps just at the right moment to make it fall short, which also gives his left hand enough room to land that uppercut, which comes exactly at the moment that he clearly knew Sean Porter was going to instinctively close his eyes and duck. Like it is like choreography, watching it over. So check the fight out if you haven't. I'm sorry to spoil the ending. Terence Crawford does win, but still try to appreciate how sort of lackadaisically he gets there. Because as far as I can tell, he has a type of win he's gunning for. Okay, let's talk really quickly, Phil, about Yanez Grant. This was on the UFC undercard. It was, as I said, like the only striking battle. It was really good. Adrian Yanez,
Great.
Super exciting. I didn't think Davey Grant would had really the right style to beat him because he is himself a bit of a slow starter and true to form. He started to have more and more success in like the second and third rounds, but it was good to see that Yanez can not only be a slow starter, but then get sort of thrown off a little bit and find his way back into a fight. He's just a super focused, disciplined young fighter.
Yeah, this was a great fight, not only from a like just a pure action, and like technical perspective, but just from like it's exactly what he needs at this kind of stage of his career.
It was a violent chess match. Like there were huge shots being flung around, and it gave Yanez some serious threats to have to adjust to.
Also, like, he was pretty disciplined with how he responded to them, because there were many times when it looked like he could have gotten in trouble.
Absolutely.
And he never really gave up on the idea. It was sort of like what we were just talking about with Crawford, where Crawford was just stubborn enough to keep going for his win condition. Yanez was just like, no, I'm not going to give up on, like, short punches and, like, right hands, and I'm not going to start going nuts. He stayed within himself for the full 3 rounds, which was, it's good to see.
Mm-hmm. Really sharp on defense. He does have a problem, Yanez, with he does a bit of posing. You know, he knows what he's doing is cool out there. Like,
yep.
You can tell he's conscious. He's a little self-conscious of that. So he does a really great job of defending and then coming back with strikes. He is a great defensive fighter, really. But he does sometimes get caught watching his work after he makes what he like feels should be the punctuation on the exchange. Where Grant is like a maniac. I love the guy. Like he gets difficult fights out of much better fighters and sometimes beats fighters that I would on paper consider better than him, because he's like a way better Nico Price. He just
without the get out of jail free card of having hideous knockout power for his division.
He's got good power.
He's in fact a pretty poor puncher for bantamweight.
That's true, actually. He's a perfectly respectable puncher by the standards of any other division. Not super impressive. As a bantamweight, he's got grapes in his gloves. He can't punch for shit for 135. But he does just like sort of calculated recklessness, extending exchanges. He breaks the your turn, my turn pattern of striking that is so endemic to MMA, which you will hear our guest Ben Kohn talk about a little later. He frequently surprises other fighters in those moments by just refusing to wait his turn and accepting the risk of an exchange. And it made for a super exciting like series of adjustments, and ultimately ended up making Yanez look even more impressive. So great fight.
I don't think he did win, but I think there was a case for Grant winning that fight.
It was close enough that he was in it the whole time for sure.
Yeah, I think he won. I can't remember which one of the last two rounds he won. I think he won round 2 on my card.
I think he won round 2.
Close.
He won round 2, and then round 3, Yanez way outscored him on volume, and but he had moments in every round and won at least one of them.
But yeah, he's got insanely ugly punching form.
Oh yeah,
but you don't know necessarily, like, especially against someone like Yanez, who kind of comes away behind a high guard. He was just swinging shots into Yanez's shoulders, and maybe sometimes they would bounce off into his head. But he would throw a bunch of times to stutter when his next shot was going to be. He kept stabbing Yanez up the middle with that front kick. I think in some ways was what really, contributed to keeping him in the fight. He went to the body. So yeah, I mean, it was just like a super competitive fight, and Yanez, I think, exactly what Yanez kind of needed from a striking perspective, because you aren't always going to get like he's getting genuinely good style matchups. One of them who was a slightly frail but extremely long straight puncher, and then the loopiest man in the UFC.
Honestly. Yeah. But like a great example, Davey Grant, a great example of the difference between technique and tactics. His technique is a fucking mess, but he is, in fact, a pretty crafty, difficult fighter to adjust to.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, let's take a break then. When we come back, Ben Kohn of the Fight Site is here to talk about all the worst fights on this UFC card, where everyone insisted on like holding on to each other, and I don't know, he'll explain it. Chiesa Brady, Ronnie Yaya. I can't even pretend to be mad about Ronnie Yaya. I'm very happy to see him win always. All of that and more, and then his instructional with Gene Sakirski on the Gooseneck Guillotine after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon.
Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, and welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are very happy to be joined, as if I wasn't irresponsible, mentioned in the first segment, by Ben Kohn from the Fight Site, and now successful mixed martial artist. Ben, I think this is my first opportunity to say, voice to voice, congratulations on your big win, Jerky Boy.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, that was quite an experience. I'll tell you that.
You sound like a guy who's won a real MMA fight. It's that sort of, that virile confidence.
Oh yeah, I'm now untouchable in any way, shape, or form. As long as I can pull guard, you're pretty screwed. So come at me, and I will butt scoot my way into your legs and butterfly sweep you. It's inevitable.
And I think that's definitely what we've learned about a long period of covering MMA, is that the people who fight in it have an unquenchable sense of serene self-confidence that can't be troubled by anything. Not for them, the getting irrationally angry at almost any perceived slight. Oh no.
No.
Yep.
You can just hear it in Ben's voice.
Yeah, it's a sense of calm that sort of he has. It could be the fighting. It could be this diet full of meat, also, which I hear is also really good for keeping you.
I definitely I am one of those people who absolutely eats all of their own product to the point that they're now in the red. So that shows how wonderful of a businessman I am.
Well, we will be talking, I'm sure, more about beef jerky and later in the show about Ben's wonderful Gooseneck Guillotine instructional with, what's the gentleman's name? Ben Sakirski? Not Ben.
That's Gene Sakirski.
Gene Sakirski, of course. My apologies. Which is very cool as well. This guy is like, Phil and I are over here faking it, doing actual MMA and martial arts related things. But first, let's fake it, Ben, and talk about a UFC card. We had a lot of grappling battles at this Tate versus Vieira event, and sort of the way Phil and I treated it in advance is how we're going to treat it today. By which I mean, let's not talk about the main event.
Hey.
I think the less said about that thoroughly dispiriting fight experience, the better. And instead, let's talk about the co-main event first and foremost. Michael Chiesa, Sean Brady. I have you here for your grappling expertise, of course, Ben, of course. But I think first I have to say, Michael Chiesa kind of won this fight, right?
If we go by the way scoring should be, I guess I would say yeah. I think that damage is supposed to win fights, right? Like that's the way it is.
Yeah, and isn't it actually in the rules that like you give weight to whether it's striking or grappling / wrestling? You give weight to one or the other based on how much of each there was in a given round. Isn't that in the rules somewhere? That like if there's 3 minutes of striking and you win, and then you kind of lose 2 minutes of grappling, you should win the round.
I believe that I think it's something about that. You are supposed to give weight to. I don't think they use the word damage anymore. I don't know what they replaced it with. I don't remember what they replaced it with. But it overrides control time.
Impact,
for sure.
Impact, I believe.
Impact, right. Because impact is so much more family friendly than damage.
It's a font.
Well, I will say, like with regards to scoring, it's got to stick my oar in for these things. Is that like there's no kind of rule that's been made in such loyally precise terms that there isn't significant room for interpretation in it. Like, I think there's because you can weight like impact more than grappling, but the obvious question is like how much. Like in this fight, these were real particularly, I think the second round is the quote unquote swing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one I'm thinking of? See, I mean, Chiesa beats the shit out of Brady in the third.
Yeah.
But that's decent but not crushing like stand up win from Chiesa in the first half, and then like Brady on his back not doing much for like the entire second half. And from this kind of stuff, I think the best thing a fighter can do, like if you want to be as realistic as humanly possible, you just got to be like, did people win fights like this in the past? Can't necessarily like go to an idealized form of like what you think the scoring should be. You just have to kind of be like, because then your career might just end up becoming like early to mid career Jorge Masvidal, where you're just like, I think it should be this, and the judges are just like, well, it isn't. Enjoy toiling in gatekeeper. Like when I was looking at it, it was one of those ones where you're like, yeah, I mean, I reckon Chiesa's landed the more meaningful strikes and all this other kind of stuff, but also, I'm fully expecting Sean Brady to win, and so is everyone else.
Yeah, I was not surprised by the decision.
No, and it shouldn't be, because like I don't think anybody was watching that second round and like going like, wow, these shots by Chiesa are absolutely just killing Brady. Like in the third round, he was beating the shit out of him. Yeah, he beat the shit out of him, and he would realize like, oh, I can just beat the shit out of him. And I don't think anyone's under any impression that a 5-rounder would not go in Brady's favor.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, was this also like the weird case of like a mutual stock lowering fight? But actually, yeah, let's shelve that one. I want to hear what Ben has to say about like grappling, because honestly, my general thoughts were like, Chiesa could at least be active enough in scrambles and push his wrestling advantage enough that I would probably pick him to win. But I thought that Brady looked like a cleaner striker on the feet, whereas the actual way it worked is that Brady just sort of won every wrestling and grappling exchange pretty much, but also looked at a long southpaw like he was fighting a space alien that he'd never seen before in his life.
Yeah, Ben.
I'll leave it up to Ben, I think.
The takedowns in particular, I think, are a good entry point into that discussion. Like, I'm pretty sure Sean Brady hit the same takedown on Michael Chiesa 3 or 4 times. What went wrong?
Yeah.
Why is Chiesa so bad at wrestling?
It's interesting. Like, Chiesa's always kind of been like defensively a lot less reliable. Both, I mean, as a wrestler and a grappler, which is interesting because, like, considering what he usually wants to do, you'd think that. But I think that's often, not often, but it's not an uncommon thing where we see like a grappler who's really dangerous and kind of, offensively they're really potent, but like for whatever reason their defensive grappling and their defensive wrestling is just not there.
One of them is now the lightweight champ.
Correct. You can call. So, with regard to the actual, grappling itself, I did like a lot of what I saw from Brady. My main concerns for him are the things that it's the application, right? Like we said, he didn't really do any damage, so his grappling is pretty crushing. Like he really is so strong, and Chiesa himself, I think, said that in the corner. Like, he's so strong. Like,
he said it in the fight. He was like, they said like, what did he said? He said something like, they were right, you are strong. And like Brady just like hooted with laughter. I thought it was a nice little moment.
I love it when that happens, by the way. I love those moments like where a fighter will like realize like, like this guy's really good, and just go like, yeah, you're really good at this. Fun fact, I said that to my opponent during the third round. I'm like, you're really strong. He didn't respond, but I did say it. So a lot of what the reason we saw Brady hit the same things over and over again is because of the positions that he was in. And this happens all the time. And I think it's a product of just the way MMA grappling has kind of gone. The common tactic of like, you know, you scoot back to the fence, you start to turn and start to like build your posts and start to work your way up the fence when you're standing up. The problem is that most fighters give their back when they do this. And that's why we see guys like, you know, Sean Brady being able to take the back and threaten those back takes and work them into takedown attempts. Aljo and you know, pretty much every elite grappler, like, we're like, wow, their back take game it's like they teleport there. Well, a big part of that is also just, you know, the meta of MMA grappling is like, you know, you're going to turn away and, you know, build your posts up because it's better to take a couple shots and stand up than to be stuck on the ground, right?
And if as an offensive grappler you train the hell out of beating that transition, you are going to teleport to a lot of backs.
Exactly. And that's why we saw him so successful with that, right? I do like specific things that he did do, which shows that he does have a lot of experience in grappling with, you know, a guy like Chiesa who does have a very long, lanky frame. And those can be an absolute, sometimes they're the worst to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. Even if they're not necessarily going to be as strong as you potentially because you're a brick shithouse like Brady, you know, there's that wiry strength, and Chiesa is very strong. And I think that a lot of people have like spoken about how strong he is when he has like, when he's tied up with you and he can get that leverage. But like, I liked how he grapefined the legs every single time that he was like working for the back, right? Because what Chiesa was trying to do is if he can stand up, if he can get his legs under him, like you're not really going to be able to stop it just because like once they're extended, he's already got so much space. And every time that Chiesa was trying to do that, he would grapefind the legs from the back. And it would really, really help him in controlling Chiesa. And even if Chiesa was able to get up, it wasn't like Brady was able to stick to his back for the most part. I did like the way Brady took advantage of this super common thing that happens in MMA, and I'm sure you guys could talk about it from a striking angle. Okay, it's my turn now. Okay, it's your turn now. Okay, it's my turn now. Okay, it's your turn now. Mm-hmm. I hate that. It's so ridiculous to me. In the second round, right? Like, basically Chiesa was like really actually doing a really good job of defending an initial takedown attempt and reversed Brady up against the fence. And then as Brady was reversing him, Chiesa just was like, okay, so now he's going to push me back into the fence and then start to like work his takedowns. And Brady just didn't. He just took him down because why would I wait for your back to be against the fence?
Yeah.
As he was turning him, it was the underhook on the left side for Brady, and on the right side he had the overhook. So what you're trying to do as you turn them is you lean your weight onto the side of your opponent's underhook so that you can lift with your underhook and turn them. So Chiesa just assumed that he would use it to back him up into the fence, and Brady just kept going down, reached down to the knee and yanked his leg out and turned him with that underhook and used it to, dropped it to the drop levels and got the double leg. So that's something that I think is really important for fighters to know. Like, don't wait to get him in the transitions.
Right. Yeah, we've talked about that with, whose wrestling did I really praise for that? It'll come to me at some point.
No problem.
Is it? It's a Russian. Your fight site guy, you'll know him. Who did you say? Who did you say, Phil?
Bryce Mitchell, was it?
Bryce Mitchell is very good at it, but it was Arman Sarukian.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Great call. I do love Arman.
Good.
I wrote a small thing on him. Yeah. Very small. It was like a prospect piece, so we all wrote like 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, and I have noticed that about him too. Like a defining quality of his wrestling is that he does not fuck around when he finds an angle. He treats it as if it's a striking exchange and it could be taken away from him at any moment because it could. And hits his takedown. The thing about, I guess the thing that bothered me about that takedown of Brady's is that it was like the third time he hit that exact double. And the first time it did look, it was a little different than the first couple variations, and the first one did look like a strength takedown. Mm-hmm. But that one was literally just, excuse the sirens. Mm-hmm. That one literally was just, this works on Chiesa. And he didn't go hard for it. He just had a little bit of timing, as you said, and how can you be an MMA fighter and you're so susceptible to doubles off the cage? That's like the thing. It's been one of the things that should, right? That's something you have to be prepared for.
Yeah. And it's actually, so there were little differences in the positioning of Chiesa during like the different ones. Cause like, I think he got that takedown again in the third round too. And it was a different spot where like, Chiesa started to do the, lower your hips and splay your legs out and start to work, grips and underhooks. And this was another thing that I really liked is that he actually, Brady, well, don't get me wrong. It does help that Brady is fuck strong. Like it's ridiculous how strong he clearly is. He's the same thickness around his shoulders and chest, and it's very weird. So one thing he was able to do is that he kind of like he dropped his right, so and I believe it was the right arm lower on the leg as Chiesa was starting to do that like leg splay thing, and just instead of trying to drive through the takedown, which is super common in MMA, he dropped it lower on the leg, right to the knee line, and was able to kind of like yank it out from under him. And because of that, Chiesa actually had no way of stopping the takedown. He couldn't sprawl back because his leg was already completely sucked in, and that's why he got taken down again. It was the same finish for the most part, like these different takedowns, but it was different. Not necessarily different entries, but different like situational situations that he was getting that same takedown entry. I want to say I remember this correctly. I think Chael was talking about how GSP had one takedown, but different entries and different timing and different. But it was really just like the double leg, and he would do a single leg occasionally, like something like that. So it was the same takedown, but different, positions or situations that he was working those takedowns in. And I think that's really something to note, because Chiesa was trying different defenses. He tried to hit the switch on him. He, was doing the leg splay thing. He was fighting hands, fighting grips, using different tactics. But the problem is that when your tactics are meant kind of like, okay, this tactic works, now I'm free. And you're not from there, you then get stuck. And it's kind of like he had different first layer defenses, but it wasn't like it wasn't chaining together in a way that would reliably get him off the fence or defending the takedown.
It's like that. It's like the novice chess player problem. Like you can cover an opening and then you forget about it. Like it becomes ineffective when you move on to addressing the next thing you have to worry about. I appreciate that insight. I mean, I think I may be inclined to be a little too hard on Chiesa because, as Phil said, this was kind of a fight where neither guy ended up looking very good, even though both did some really impressive things. Like, I think you could say this was one of Chiesa's best ever striking performances. But that like still meant 2 rounds of kind of, not doing that great, kind of getting some shots out, and then like being way too big with the footwork. And God, there was one point where he looked exactly like Luke Rockhold against Michael Bisping because he tried to throw a jab that put him so far off balance he had to skitter back out of the range like 6 feet. It was still, I think, the best we've seen from him. And Brady clearly is a phenomenal wrestler and grappler. And I did think it was really interesting to see him succeeding in doing that against a big, long, tall guy. You could tell there was a sort of struggle point in a lot of those positions on the ground. Where he really, really had to worry about Chiesa getting any kind of base under him or he would lose control of him completely. But they, it was just kind of like 50-50 with neither guy really knowing, being able to come up with a solution to stop the other guy beating them in their 50.
I do want to add one thing about Brady's grappling, particularly from the back. His strength is very clearly on display in a lot of those positions, in particular, like when he's flattening the hips and stuff like that. His hips are clearly absurdly strong. Yeah. But what I really, really like is like he's very clearly also well schooled as a grappler. He made sure, like for the most part in this fight, and this is something that MMA fighters fuck up all the time. Like his chest was right behind the back of Michael Chiesa at all times, which allows you to stick to the back, right? It's a lot harder to get someone off your back when they are chest to back, like shoulder to shoulder, especially if you're longer and taller, because then it's even harder. There's a lot less space to work with. And I also really appreciated when he had hooks in, he was actively placing his foot like on the hips, and on the upper thigh, and like pushing against Chiesa's far side inner thigh, because, you know, if you don't have a guy fully locked down, because they're a really good scrambler, and Chiesa did show off a lot of good defensive grappling too. Obviously, he was never in danger of getting rear naked choked in any realistic sense. He did a good job protecting himself. There were really no strikes landed by Brady. So, you know, Chiesa was relatively safe, and he just had a hard time with the control, because Brady's game seemed to have been, you know, geared towards, I'm going to continue to flow and transition and just maintain position no matter what. And he did that really, really well because of how active he was in not trying to like hold the position as he was losing it, but rather he focuses on, okay, I'm losing the position, next position. Okay, next position, next position. The only problem is that he's not doing any damage, and this is why there was that, you know, it could be argued that Chiesa really won that fight. And that's kind of one of my biggest problems with Brady going forward, is that, one, he needs to develop a clinch striking game, like a really good one too, one that puts the guys in danger. Two, he needs to learn how to cut off the cage a little bit better, because Chiesa is a big dude who bounds around at range, but it's not like he's, you know, one of the best in terms of outside footwork.
Yeah. And you're in the apex, you know, like you already are working with an advantage. How would this fight have looked if Chiesa was in a big octagon?
Oh yeah, I don't even know what. Like, it was a lot worse, I think, for sure. Like, actually, and the other thing is, like, on the ground, he just needs to get more ground and pound off. Like, yeah, you have to be okay with losing position to land some damage, because you need to score points. So.
Yeah, but the thing is, like you said, I think that would be, again, obviously, everything on this show is easier said than done. That's why we're podcasters. But he demonstrated, even in this control-focused fight, an ability to maintain position against some pretty good creative scrambles. So, like, I think he could get some more strikes off. It didn't seem like he was struggling at any point on the ground. I guess it's especially easier said than done when the consequences of you losing a position are so often just getting lit up on the feet. Like, I know round 2 was not round 3 for as far as Chiesa's striking was concerned by any stretch, but he was still landing the cleaner, harder shots, and Brady clearly didn't like it. He didn't like the southpaw thing. Like, Phil, what did you say? Like, it was some sort of strange alien mutant.
He'd never seen it before in his life.
He looked really flummoxed by the rangy southpaw thing.
So what's he going to do when he comes in? It's like, he's going to throw a long left.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, yep.
He's going to paw. He's going to throw a long left.
He literally isn't using his jab. He's just grabbing at your wrist or punching you in the palm over and over and over.
That's the other thing. Chiesa was very lucky not to get a point deduction in this fight.
Oh,
those eye pokes were bad.
Yeah. Yep.
Just to highlight something, Chiesa, I just want to highlight how good Chiesa's grappling is, and just so people do understand what makes this so impressive. Like, in the last minute, like, Chiesa was able to get out of that back mount, and it was super clever what he did. He pushed off the cage, which basically put Brady's hips to the mat and pointed directly up. And one of the ways to get out of the back is to make sure that your hips are pointed a different direction as your opponent's, right? Same thing as like your chest to back, like you need to keep hip to hip. And Chiesa took advantage of that and pushed off the cage, which forced Brady's hips, straight to the back, to the ceiling. And as that happened, he actually turned his hips and got the weight over the upper thigh, and that allowed him to actually escape the back mount. So he was able to kind of loosen the hooks that way and get out. And when he took Brady down, like, that was just, Brady was like, all right, I'll just go back to the clinch and hold him for the last 30 seconds. The case is like, nope, I'm going to toss you on your ass if you try and be even remotely complacent, and kind of just beat the shit out of him for the last 30 seconds.
All right.
So yeah, Case is really good.
He is good, but it's just one of those fights. Look, I think Catlin Vieira and Misha Tate are both better than what they looked like in the main event too. sometimes you have a weird effect on each other where you end up looking unremarkable on the whole. Yes, Phil?
That was really one of the sort of the key stories of this fight, of this card. Like, a lot of people were like, it's card of the year, and well, in some ways it was. I don't think it really was, but it really was kind of marked by weird and ugly performances. Like, there was very, very little. I mean, pretty much the entire main card. You found yourself going, oh yeah, that was way better than what I expected. It's more just kind of like, yeah, guess.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was okay, to be honest, overall. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, I think everyone was sort of discounting the main event already.
Yeah.
Which
is why I wasn't
helps a lot.
Yeah, I wasn't that disappointed by it. How could this be the worst card of the year when the main event, Sean Brady, Michael Chiesa, is okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Okay, let's call that a break then. When we come back, we are going to talk to Ben about the instructional that he put out. What? Hello?
Yes, I didn't hear you.
What was that? There was some kind of dismissive hissing sound, Ben.
That was me biting my fingernail.
I don't know what that means.
I'm not joking. That's actually what just happened.
Oh my God. After this, we're going to talk to Ben about the instructional he put out with the fight site and Gene Sakirski on the Gooseneck Guillotine. And maybe a little more about your MMA experience, Ben, after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. All right, Ben, I want to talk to you about this instructional that you put out with the fight site. First of all, it's intensely cool to me that I know people who are not only doing actual real fights, but are putting out instructional tapes. Like, I've watched some of these before. I've watched a few Ryan Hall instructionals. I watched and sort of criticized and made fun of the Anderson Silva one at different points. Very cool. And, I have to say, very easy to follow. It works as an instructional. It fixates on one particular technique and then all the sort of ancillary techniques connected to that. That is what, black belt Gene Sakirski calls the Gooseneck Guillotine. So what is the deal with this instructional?
So that was a really good introduction, first of all. So
thank you
that was
so
really
much.
good. I should have hired you to do the marketing. The gooseneck is essentially it's a modified guillotine grip that Gene kind of he didn't invent it, but he honed it into what you see in the instructional. Mm-hmm. It's an entire system based around a specific kind of grip, and in particular, a position that he finds most people seem to struggle with, or just not be aware that this position really is there. And that's bottom and top half guard, more particularly working from top half guard. What makes the guillotine that Gene does, the gooseneck, so effective is that it increases the amount of pressure on the neck, whether there's an arm in, an arm out, regardless of any of that, from half guard, full guard, bottom, top. It's just such an effective way of really increasing the pressure on the neck. And what I really like about it is that, for me, someone like me and someone like Gene, we actually have really weak wrists because of injuries and all that, and the constant grappling. So our weak, like the Marcelo team, kind of is painful for me to do because of the rotation that it puts on, the rotational force it puts on my wrist. So for me, I actually didn't really have any sort of guillotine game other than the Jacker Manson one, for I don't know what it's actually called, by the way.
That Schultz headlock one? Yeah.
So this actually really, really helped my game, and it's especially useful for guys who are like interested in doing MMA, because when you add the extra like inch of padding from the glove, it just increases the pressure even more, and it doesn't hinder your grip at all. So, this Gooseneck Guillotine system, it gives you such a wide range of options to choose from where you want to apply it, and you don't even necessarily need to use the full choke. I just use the gooseneck to get people to move most of the time. And I can do that with one hand without closing it. It's an automatic increase in the pressure just from the way that the wrist rotates, or that the way that you create the gooseneck, I guess, position with your hand. So it's just a really, really good thing for people to learn.
I think it's a good image to describe the position, but what is the gooseneck position for the listener specifically?
So if you were like, think of it like there's a guy's head in front of you and it's facing down, and you're starting to like slide your arm under for the guillotine. So with the blade of your wrist pointed towards the ceiling, I want you to take your hand and kind of just start looking at the front of your wrist the way you would look at your watch, is the best way I could put it. And then curl your hand down a little bit. And when you look at that hand, it kind of is like a gooseneck, like the head and neck of a goose. So when you look at your watch and then you actually pick the hand up, you're going to actually see that it's like a goose's neck and head. And that's the easiest way I would describe it. Just look at your watch when you're doing the guillotine, and you're going to feel the difference in the pressure. And I've put so many people, like, just to show them, like, hey, you should try this. And I just show them, just look at your watch, and it's a night and day difference in the amount of pressure you can apply to the neck.
So I'm really interested in the idea, because like the guillotine is like it's one of the most effective moves in mixed martial arts. It is also one of the moves that most often loses people fights. Like it's the guillotine. People go for so many guillotines even to this day, and I think behind the rear naked choke, it is the most common submission by a good stretch. It works. It's a way to counter takedowns that you're going to give in that position. Guy's head in front of you, looking at the floor. Often.
Yeah.
So are there any advantages where using this different method? I'm really curious about the idea of you being able to say, have like only one hand really engaged and really be able to control a position where you can use this increased pressure to not necessarily throw away the entire fight if the choke itself doesn't work. Does this facilitate, connection to other techniques?
Yeah, first of all, I do apologize. I don't know if you can hear the leaf blower in the background, but
I can't.
There's nothing I can do about that.
I can't. You're fine.
Okay, just making sure.
Is that Holly Holm outside? That's Phil's thing about the.
That's good. Okay, so with the gooseneck, and what it allows for is basically, because of one of the things also that is important to note is that Gene puts a big emphasis on how to actually like finish these techniques, because a lot of people will lock something in and then just not be able to finish it. So he breaks down exactly how to finish an arm and guillotine, the darce, the Japanese necktie. We actually accidentally came up with a move, which we just decided to call the Russian necktie because Gene is Russian, by accident, because both of us forgot how to do the Japanese necktie and kind of figured out, we kind of figured out our own, this Russian necktie. Basically his whole gooseneck system, what makes it so effective is that all the moves kind of link to each other. And if you actually buy the instructional, you get a flow chart that Gene created, which kind of explains step by step how to get to the different positions and how they link to each other. Because the grip, the guillotine itself is a useful tool in getting to better positions. So using the guillotine from the bottom to get on top, something like Hanayaya did, a perfect example. I did it in my fight, actually, where I used the Gooseneck Guillotine grip to get to a position that I could sweep him over, and then he came back on top. As I got back on top again, I switched it to the Jack Hermanson Guillotine. But I use it all the time just to set up and initiate sweeps, get on top. what I love about the guillotine in particular, the gooseneck, is that even if you don't necessarily have a good position to get a submission, it's incredibly threatening to be able to threaten a choke from top half guard, which is where a lot of the gooseneck really shines. And because he's able to create so much pressure in these positions, you have to either let him pass or try and, scramble or something like that, which sets up things like the Darce choke, and, getting to the Japanese necktie and stuff like that. So everything about the actual positions themselves, he explains how to link them while also using the gooseneck grip or guillotine grip in particular, because it adds so much extra pressure in these different positions.
Yeah.
So it's a really useful tool, even if you already have that kind of game.
Is it?
Presumably, it's also just like physically horrible. It did front to another. Like people might be necessarily ready for another kind of guillotine, but they might be like, oh, this person is now like jamming his jamming his wrist right into like the soft part of my throat. This is incredibly like I guess a good part of like a sweep submission is not necessarily like, as you mentioned, the finish, but the sort of the shock and the ability to move positions from it.
Sure.
Yeah. It is incredible. It does make things more painful. Like I don't know, like there's no plainer way of saying it. It makes the guillotine that you were already going to do more painful for who you're doing it to. So there's no downside to that. It just causes it creates a more visceral reaction. Like you can feel the difference. It is an immediate tightening. And what I love about that is that you can apply it you don't need to apply it the second you're putting the guillotine. You can actually like get the hand into the position before you start to do the gooseneck. And what that does is like, if the guy is like, oh yeah, I don't really get threatened by guillotines, I'm really good at escaping them. That when it allows you to like, okay, now my hand's in position, gooseneck. And the reaction to people like that, it's night and day. I can tell you from my own personal experience, no one guillotines me anymore. Like unless you're a really high level black belt or you're Gene, you can't really guillotine me unless I'm like messing around and like letting you work because of Gene and training with him for so long. But even like my game is to like bait the guillotine so that I can get like certain things. I can't play that game with him because I will just get completely destroyed. And the way he applies it immediately is crazy. And we have at his gym, like there's this guy, Wayne, who had been training, like last time I rolled with him, he was maybe training less than a year, but like as a white belt. And like his entire game was centered entirely around the gooseneck guillotine. And he nearly tapped me. He's tapped blue and purple belts just because like he really focused on learning how to utilize this system. And because the system puts you in positions like half guard, top half guard and side control and stand mount, like they're also linked to basic positions that you should be in and learning anyway. So it really is a great starting instructional, I feel like, as well as for people who, want to add a tool to their game that can just make them a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah, I actually did. There's a reason I compared it at the top to the Ryan Hall instructionals I've watched, which Ryan Hall is a fantastic instructor. If you've ever watched his videos, and Gene does a really, really good job of presenting it, but also like, explaining in a step-by-step way the like basic fundamental principle concepts that make it work, which to me is always super helpful, rather than like if you just run through a laundry list of moves that I then have to study. Like I don't know what I don't know, and it's harder to learn that way. But having each little element of why something works the way it does explained is always super helpful.
Also, it's not that long. It's
No.
only like 40 minutes. So you get some bloopers too. We tried to make it as concise and easily digestible as possible, like you said. So that was like a concerted effort to specifically make it so that, it can be accessible to people who are, not necessarily very well versed or knowledgeable in grappling.
That's me.
Or just starting out. And also for people who have no time because they're already black belts and just want to like Just pick up a cool move or two.
Yeah.
Perfect for that.
So if you want
people who want to go to their gym and just really upset and traumatize the people that they're rolling with.
I can tell you the funniest thing for me is still when I go to a new gym and like I'll just be like lazily putting the gooseneck on just to watch the reaction. Every time, the first time I do it, it's that what the fuck moment, and I love it. It is so funny to me, and it will never not be funny to me. Like I'll just be like, guillotine grip, gooseneck, and they're just like, the fuck.
It is
it's so great.
It's an underrated element of grappling from my very brief experience with it. Like with striking, people don't realize how, like you can't tell where anything is. Like you're flailing and you're flinching and all of these horrible feelings of just being sort of afloat at sea. You can't get that until you try it. Grappling, the thing you don't get until you try it is how much it hurts.
Oh my God.
Like it really sucks. I think I've talked on the show before about the time, Tom Grant, Ben, he used to write for BE. He just put a Kimura grip on me once. It hurt. It made me.
It's not fun.
It made me feel
really
the way
not fun.
my poor sisters and loved ones feel when I'm doing grappling moves on them. Like it hurts. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It's just a thing. It's just pressure. No, it hurts.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
So the gooseneck guillotine will allow you to hurt your training partners even more than grappling them already does.
Yeah, no, it's a brutal move. Granted, it's the neck, so it's soft and fleshy. So you won't bruise, or maybe you will. I've had some bruises on my neck. Maybe I'm talking out of my ass here.
Guillotine is the sock full of oranges of grappling moves, is what you're saying.
The way I would explain it is that I'm also a dunderhead. So, when Gene puts it on me, it's a 2-minute sequence of him trying to choke the living fucking shit out of me and me just refusing to tap because I'm a stubborn mule. And that's basically all I have in my grappling repertoire is just you're going to have to really try hard to submit me. So that's maybe why my neck will end up looking like, a horror show. But for the most part, it's those aren't usually how exchanges go with most people when they're put on the
just a temporary pain, folks. The instructional will not actually come and kill you. Where can people find it, Ben? Tell them how to get a hold of the Gooseneck Guillotine.
Sure. So you have two methods or options to purchase it. You can sign up to the Fight Site Patreon for $50 a month, which in addition to actually getting you the instructional and the flow chart that comes along with it, which is really, really useful, I imagine, for people who just want to who can watch it and then have that little bit of a refresher in case something is missing in their sequences when they're trying to practice it. It's $50. It gets you access to the instructional on the flowchart as well as every piece of content that's on the Fight Site Patreon, access to basically every tier that is below, that is $50 and below. So Discord, asking questions for the podcast, article requests, stuff like that. The other option is if you want to do a one-time purchase, you would basically, you would message us directly, either myself or Ed, the editor-in-chief of the Fight Site. You can message us and we will send you a copy that can only be used by you, along with the instructionals flowchart as well. And that's a $60 purchase for one-time purchase.
There you go. The Gooseneck Guillotine from the Fight Site. And Ben, thank you for coming on. And I hope that the level of grappling expertise you brought to the second segment and the bonus episode that people should check out on our Patreon, not theirs, will have fully demonstrated the value of this instructional, that we have a guy who absolutely knows what the fuck he's talking about in a way that we usually don't on this show, who's going to help teach you about this technique. Thank you, Ben, for coming on. Where can people find you online otherwise? That if they're going to message you on Twitter as requested, what's the handle?
So first of all, thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate you guys letting me come on and talk about the instructional and stuff like that. It really is very much appreciated. Always love talking fights with you guys anyway, so that's always a treasure, a treat as well. Oh no, that's a treasure. That's a treasured thing for me.
I'll take that.
You could find me on Twitter at AgentBen10. You could find me on Instagram, BenCohnMG. You could find me on Facebook, but I don't really use it. And yeah,
Agent
the
Ben
fight site.
10? Surely
Agent
that is
Ben
a
10.
Yeah.
surely that is a mispronunciation that has haunted you for some time. The people thought
Nope.
you were then like you were referencing the children's
People thought,
cartoon.
No, I
yeah,
think
everyone asked me, like, is it the
Not the
children's cartoon? I'm like, nope.
Oh, it's
What?
not. I thought it was
I
the
think that
children's
was a
cartoon.
different show.
Wait, what
I
is
don't know what's
Agent?
airing in Britain, but goddamn.
What is Agent Ben 10 a reference to then?
It just rhymed.
Wow,
Nothing. It's just stupid.
That sucks,
it's just,
dude.
I was a teenager. There's just no reason. There's zero reason for it. Like, I was aware of the show, but I never watched it. Like, it wasn't like I was like, oh man, I got Agent Ben. I was like, this sounds fun.
oh man. Well, if you want to find the other two people you've heard on this show at their much cooler, less embarrassing handles on Twitter, I'm at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. Phil is at Evil Greg Jackson. I know exactly what that means. I know where he got it from. I don't even have to ask. It's a great handle, Phil. Congratulations. You did great. And thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back next week with the fight card that I think initially expected to be happening this week before I, looked more closely at the schedule. Jose Aldo versus Rob Font. I'm not looking at it now, but there's a couple other really, really exciting fights on that card as well. So until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands. There wasn't a lot of face punching, though.
I was going to say, if you came for the finer points of face punching, you definitely didn't come to the right place.
Well,
There's been heavy top control.
It has been heavy top control. Man, that sounds like a terrible podcast.